are attending them. Their demographics are always considered, as well as the question of what they will benefit from the seminars is also considered. She is a competent educator with skills in research, business education, early childhood education, and now innovation in technology. She is a leader in the field of administration and school franchising. Her areas of expertise are curriculum research for early childhood education, marketing, and business ethics. She is an innovator and a game changer in technology with her digital learning platform. Now her professional experience. Her journey into the field of education began as a teacher in Cambridge Montessori School in 1998-1999. She worked as a principal in Welby School Inc. from 2015 to 2019. Now she is the founder of Yestech IT Solutions and academic director at Montessori T. Oro Inc. Her educational background. She did her Bachelor of Science in Elementary Education with special studies in early childhood education from Assumption College, Philippines. She did her Master of Science in Business Education from Southern New Hampshire University, New England, United States of America. She also completed teacher training for the ages 3 to 6-year-old children from American Montessori Society, United States of America. She successfully completed her Doctor of Philosophy in Educational Administration and Supervision from Finma Cagayan de Oro College, Philippines. Dr. Alexandria has authored 2 book series for nursery, kinder, and grade-children. She is a facilitator for the Movers program of UNDP and Asian Youth Organization, Philippines. She has attended numerous seminars. She is a recipient of awards. She received the Outstanding Chairman
ওরে দেখিস না
in the
কথা শুনিস না বিরক্ত লাগে
India.
তোকে বারণ করলাম
She was chosen in the top 1% startup in the world out of 160,916 startups from 166 countries. She was the only Philippine representative and was selected in the 45 best startups in Philippines. In the international summit held in Bangkok, she was nominated as the most outstanding higher education. Manila DOCN parochial schools endorse her books Learning the World of Language and Digital Kids for nursery, kinder, and grade as best books in preschool and kindergarten category. Dr. Alexandria is the Chief Learning Officer at Ladu Prime Chair Partnerships and Programs. Ladu Prime. Then she's the Chair Partnerships and Programs in Rotary Club of Alabang Madrigal Business Park. She's also Chair Partnerships and Programs in Asian Youth Organization, Philippines. She is the President of Graduate School Student Body Organization, Cagayan de Oro College, Finma. So, presenting before you our guest speaker today, Rotarian Dr. Alexandria Reyes. Thank you.
So, thank you for that introduction. I think it's quite long, but yeah, so I'm very excited to be here with the Rotary exchange of speakers. So today I'd like to also introduce my friends. They are my fellow movers, and I have with me Dr. Lorenzo Sablay. He is a medical doctor. He is also the head of the Movers program of the Rotary Club of Alabang Madrigal Business Park. He is also the head of the Movers Program of the ASEAN Youth Organization, and he is involved with the Maria movement as well. And he has a lot of volunteer work that he does, aside from being a medical doctor that he is very active. And he is here, that is Dr. Lorenzo Sablay. And of course, we have with us Edwina Zhan Shuang Zhang. She's graduated from University of College London, majoring in education, gender, and international development. She has worked in the Philippines, East Africa, and China in the past 6 years as an international development professional. Just recently, she has completed her CSC JPO internship with UNDP Philippines on gender and health programs, working with local government units to enhance their capacity on HIV investment planning and gender mainstreaming. Next, she will serve in the Faculty of Education in the first and only women's university in Somaliland. Please welcome my other mover, facilitator, Edwina Zhan. So we're going to start with our sharing movers workshop. I hope that you will benefit from this. It was designed for the youth and the youth at heart, just like us, and of course educators use this as well. So thank you for inviting us. So may I ask Edwina to share the screen so we can actually start?
Yes, po. But can someone just enable me to share my screen? I just tried, but it seems not yet.
Can we give her the co-host?
Uh, okay, I shall make her the host because I can't find the co-host option.
Okay.
Yeah, you're the host now.
All right. Thank you. Share my screen. All right. Could you see my screen now?
Education liberates the intellect, unlocks the imagination, and is fundamental for self-respect. It is the key to prosperity and opens a world of opportunities, making it possible for each of us to contribute to a progressive, healthy society. Learning benefits every human being and should be available to all. To ensure quality education, we all have to take action. And I'd like you to get inspired as we talk about SDG for quality education. Next slide, please. Everyone can help to make sure that we meet the global goals. Use this as a target for us to help others and to help the youth. So, welcome to SDG 4, Level 1. Next slide, please. So, the rules of this workshop is first, listen with attention, share with intention. This is going to be interactive for us the whole time. And of course, you need to suspend judgment. Trust the process and the facilitators. Feel free to share your feelings and reactions anytime that you want. And of course, we would enjoy the claps, those celebrates, hearts, and etc. We would really enjoy that. Have fun and make new friends. This is SDG for quality education. So the objectives of the workshop include what is quality education? We're going to talk about that. Why is quality education important for you and for me? And how can I explain quality education to my friends and to other people? How can I take action and mobilize my community in terms of learning about quality education and talking about it? Next slide, please. So let me tell you about the Movers Program. The Movers Program wants to mobilize youth across Asia Pacific to raise awareness about the Sustainable Development Goals and develop entrepreneurial mindsets by organizing and facilitating the Movers Workshop in their communities. After the Movers Workshop, you can too bring this to your community, to your friends, and to your country. So this is sponsored by Youth Co-Lab, the UNDP, City, and the curriculum partners are right over here on the other side. And of course, our program partners are the UN volunteers, which is us. Okay. So let's start with our icebreaker because this is going to be interactive the whole time. So if you could like join us, then it would be perfect. Let's move to the next slide, please. So at the end of this workshop, I'll be happy if these can lead the sentence. Me, at the end of the workshop, I will be really happy if you would have a lot of takeaways from what we have shared, and of course, like maybe something that would ignite your spirit and even pursue education some more and really explore what education has to offer. So let's see on chat. Please type what your thoughts are. So there will be a few of us inside. So may I ask you guys to like answer, or President Shilpa to answer, perhaps. So at the end of this workshop, I'll be happy if. Thank you, Dr. Alex, for the opportunity. Thank you also, Dr. Lorenzo. I think we are on Facebook. Anybody? At the end of this workshop, I'll be happy if maybe you can type on chat and I will read it. President Shilpa, you can type it on chat, and you can also type your thoughts, Rotarian Madu, so I can read it and share it with everyone.
Yeah, I'm typing.
Okay, so maybe because I do not see what you have written on chat, maybe I'll be happy if I can help sponsoring more girl child education. Okay, that is from Rotarian Chair Madu, and of course from Rotarian Professor Dr. Shilpa. She goes, if I will get some novel and concrete takeaway from the workshop. Okay, so that is wonderful. We hope that we will be able to really share something, as we have prepared this for everybody, depending on the level of learning that you can share as well. So I'll be happy if I can learn from the participants what is quality education in India, because yesterday we were in CDO, Cagayan de Oro. We were talking to a lot of teachers from basic ed, and of course the perspective is different. And now we are in India, so probably the perspective is also different. So it is going to be exciting for us as we continue on with this workshop. So we are still in the icebreaker part, so let's continue on with the next slide. So before the Sustainable Development Goals, there were the Millennial Development Goals, and of course the Millennial Development Goals was in 2000 to 2015, and it was to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, achieve universal primary education. This is what their concern was: promote gender equality and empower women, 4, reduce child mortality, 5, improve maternal health, combat HIV/AIDS, malaria, and other diseases, ensure environmental sustainability, and global partnerships for development. But the problem with the MDGs was that it was only focused on countries that were experiencing poverty. They really didn't consider the other thriving countries. And of course, now with the SDGs, they have considered all the countries, even the ones that are not having a difficulties. Because during this time, they were only concentrating on poverty-stricken countries, and therefore, as you can see, their goal was just to achieve universal primary education, which is not enough. Right now with SDGs, it's different. So let's move on to the next slide. So as you can see, to ensure that by 2015, children everywhere, boys and girls alike, will be required to complete a full course of primary schooling. This was the simple goal because it was just looking through the lens of the poverty-stricken countries. But now they have considered with SDGs other countries, even the thriving ones. So it is different. If you look at this, they only have 8. Now we have a lot. So can we move on to the next slide, please? So if you look here, from the MDG to the SDG 4, we are going to really focus on SDG 4, which is quality education. As you can see here in MDG 2, it says that it was the first global development framework, and it focused more on low-income countries. So some other countries were not included for real, and so the involvement was not there. And so it only focused on primary education, which was not a concern for other countries because they have that available already. So now with SDGs, we have considered to apply it to all the countries, and of course focus on lifelong learning and 21st century skills that go beyond primary education. So now they talk about like secondary education and technical skills and other things like that, as well as lifelong learning, as we are about to enter the 4th industrial revolution. So this is what they have considered, which we are targeting up to year 2030. So the SDG goals is more complete. There are 17 of them. Actually, there's 18 according to Dr. Lorenzo. There's like one country in Cambodia that they have made this like a priority. So now with this, we are trying to target this by 2030. However, I think if we gauge ourselves, I think we're not even hitting almost all the goals yet. So it's really difficult. Even with COVID, we are affected by this. As you can see, number 1 is no poverty. Number 2 is zero hunger, which is really difficult right now because of the situation that there is. And of course, good health and well-being. Number 4 is quality education. I think there is a lot of disparity right now with the rich and poor, especially with internet connection. It's really difficult. Mostly in other countries where there are hinterlands where they do not have access to education, so it's really hard. And as well as gender equality, Dr. Edwina can expound about this. In other African countries, I think women are not given the priority to really study, and so they really fight for their right to be educated. Of course, there's clean water and sanitation, there's affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, reduce inequalities. We are trying to hit that with my startup, the corporate social responsibility, to help those that need access to education. So we have a free platform aside from our premium platform. And of course, we want sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production. I think President Trump stopped supporting this SDGs, and now through the Paris Convention, and now Biden has joined this. So I think it was because of the climate change and the other concerns that we have. However, I cannot talk about that because we're just going to talk about education today. And of course, there's climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice, and strong institutions, partnerships for goals. So there are a lot of goals that we really want to hit by 2030, but unfortunately, because of what is happening, it is really a challenge for all of us. So with quality education, all the more, we really see that. And of course, let's move forward to the next slide, please. So my question is, do you think SDG 4 is linked with other SDGs as well? If yes, which SDGs? So could you type it on chat and I will just read something. So the Sustainable Development Goals are a set of 17 goals and 169 targets unanimously adopted at the United Nations General Assembly Summit in 2015. The goals will come into force in January 2016 and will drive international development work for the next 15 years. So that's when they started. The 2030 agenda for SDG and the adoption of the SDGs seek to incorporate and balance the 3 dimensions of SDG, which is economic, social, and environmental. So if you can see, there's a balance. We're looking at that right now compared to the MDGs. The new agenda represents a fundamental shift in development thinking by recognizing the underlying and dynamic interlinkages between the 3 dimensions, and by driving universal and integrated development across all countries. The SDGs look to address the root causes of poverty and how different drivers of change influence and relate to one another to achieve the transformation for sustainable development. So this is what the SDG is about. So my question is, do you think it is linked together? So please type on chat and I will read it. Yes, according to Rotarian professor, it is linked together. How about you, Rotarian Madu, Chair Madu? Do you think they're linked together? Yes, they are linked together. Of course, obviously they are. Yes, it is really linked because education is the foundation for a solution that will address the will address the root cause of the problems and that the SDGs want to solve. That is true. So let us move on to our next slide and we will talk about it some more. Remember, this is still the icebreaker. And so here we are, according to the Commonwealth of Education Hub, our source. This is how it looks like when it is linked. When we talk about reducing poverty and increasing income, we talk about the no poverty and the decent work and economic growth. So it is actually linked. And when we talk about better health, like feeding those students in primary school, sometimes they have a program that they feed the students in public schools, and so we focus on zero hunger and good health and well-being, because they say that when students are not hungry, they are able to function really well. And of course, clean water and sanitation. I think this is a problem in some African countries and other countries as well. So we see that when they address this, they can function better and they can give a better quality education. So they are really linked together. Another one is it drives sustainable growth. Obviously, the industry and innovation infrastructure. If we graduate students that are able and that are capable of giving back to the economy and giving back to the community, then we are able to have sustainable cities and communities as well. So through their innovation and through what they try to really give back to our cities and communities, we see that, and there is really a link. Now, with the protection of the planet, oh my gosh, there's a lot too. And if you can see, there's 5 of them, like climate action, life below water, life below land, our responsible consumption and production. I think this is for the industries, for them to really be more aware of what they are doing. I think education should not just stop there. It should also be in protecting our planets, and of course affordable and clean energy. We also focus on that. So there are a lot of things that we really can address with quality education. Now here, to prevent inequality, of course we address it with gender equality. Of course, women are now finding their way up and really showing themselves. Like right now, there are 4 of us inside this Zoom meeting, and we only have 1 man. So we really are concerned with what education can give us and how we can improve ourselves more. And so we are trying to gain our spot in this field as well. So there's also to reduce inequalities and of course peace, justice, and in situations. And the other one is partnerships for goals. I think this is really important as an educator and as the founder of a startup that is edtech. I think the more that I am able to find people that could help me really improve the lives of others and really share with others through my volunteer work, through this Movers program, and of course by giving time to share the sustainable development goals, soft skills, etc. It could really lead to change and help others. So I'm very thankful to presidential for like giving me the opportunity to do this as well with a series of workshops that we will be doing. So let's move on to the next. And of course, I'd like to thank the Rotary of Bombay West as well. So SDG 4 and other SDGs, this is what it looks like. If you address goal number 1, 4, and 8, education really reduces poverty and increases income. If you can see here, if all children left school with basic reading skills, 171 million people could be lifted from poverty. So this is like the data that UNDP got through the Movers Program module that we have. And so this is very true. The reason why I actually made my startup was I was so bothered with the OECD report that the Philippines was like 80 over 80 in reading and comprehension. And I thought, oh my God, I can't believe that. But this report is like really true because the students that were taking the quiz didn't know how to take the quiz. So what they did instead of taking the quiz, they just played games. And so their scores in reading and comprehension in math and science was this 80 over 80. So that's like unbelievable, but the data showed it. So I said, maybe I should make a startup where I can like teach them how to take a quiz, so they can really concentrate and know how to answer those quizzes. So this data shows that if we are able to really teach them basic reading skills, 171 million will be lifted from poverty. That's like a powerful number. And then 1 extra year of school increases earnings of people by 10% for individuals and 20% for women. So I think we are in a good spot. We are really learning and feeding our brains and minds, and I really hope that we can like share this with others because the data really shows that women improve better if they study and they educate themselves. So let's continue on with the next slide. So if we linked it with better health, we will see that it would target goals 2, 3, and 6, and education leads to better health, improved nutrition. So a mother's education improves her children's nutrition, especially as she seeks higher levels of schooling. So we look at the mothers as well. She should be nourished. She should be like eating like the right food, and of course the students. I think like everybody can relate. If you are hungry, you cannot really function well and you cannot really learn well. I feel like when I'm hungry, I am actually angry too. So they have this term, it's called hangry or angry, like you're hungry and angry combined. So I guess that's so real and that's so true. And how can you learn when your stomach is growling? So I think some countries are really taking this into consideration. They give food to their students before they even start. They give them bread or whatever, like meal, like rice meal. And I think it really has an impact, and it really addresses that problem because as we know, there are a lot of poverty-stricken children, and they really want to go to school, but they cannot concentrate when they are hungry. So 4 million child deaths are prevented thanks to the global increase in women's education. So when we teach women to nurse themselves, etc., their babies are saved or their children are saved because of this. So this is the data that we have and we are sharing it with you. So they are definitely linked with each other. So with number 16, let's move on to the next slide, please. Okay, now, of course, SDG 4 is linked with goals 9 and 11. Education drives sustainable growth. Of course, when we graduate, a lot of like capable individuals, a lot of really good individuals that really would pay it forward to our communities, pay it forward to our country. Countries' inhabitants become better educated. They are more likely to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. So we, when we do this, contribute to SDG 4 and focus also on 9 and 11, we are able to make smart cities, etc. I think with India, I can say that you have a lot of unicorns right now, like 22 unicorns in just a year, and that is like really mind-boggling for us because we do not even have one in the Philippines. But you know what? Maybe because of the education that the students are getting there, you have a lot of engineers right now, and that is like I think an advantage compared to other countries where they do not focus on that. And I think we are leaning towards technology, and we are leaning towards engineering and science. So I think you are addressing that, and of course China is doing that as well, and Vietnam is seeing that. However, I think our country, we still have to really show our people that this is important for us to make like sustainable cities and really thrive as a country and really contribute to our economy. So I think this is like the end of my part in the discussion. I will turn it over to Dr. Lorenzo, and we will talk about slide 17 to 34. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alex. That was a very nice start, and really did a great job in introducing our participants to the foundations of quality education and its relations with SDGs. So, continuing what Dr. Alex has discussed, quality education is also linked to the SDGs that help us protect our planet and help us safeguard creation, help us achieve the goals for climate action. How does education help us in protecting the planet? It's related to goals 7, 12, 13, 14, and 15. Education or educated citizens are more inclined to, number 1, build and maintain clean energy infrastructures. Number 2, show a greater concern about the well-being of the environment. Third is use their energy and water resources more efficiently. And fourth, recycle. So this shows us that more educated people are involved in climate action solutions and climate innovation solutions in a great spectrum, even from the most basic one, like recycling, reducing waste, to even participating in building sustainable cities, sustainable sources of energy, or even advocating and showing activism for the environment. This goes to show that education really increases our awareness and knowledge of the issues that concern the environment. So increased environmental concern, it is shown that in a study of 29 countries, it was found that the percentage of people concerned about the environment increases with education. So it's 25% with less than a secondary education, 37% with a secondary education, and up to a whopping 46% to those with a tertiary education. So as you go along the line of education, as you gain more educational attainment, your awareness for the environment increases as well. So next slide, please. So quality education also prevents inequality and injustice through goals 5, 10, and 16 through increasing the per capita income. So a 0.1% improvement in a country's education can, over 40 years, raise a country's per capita income by 23%. Because, again, more educated people, more educated citizens leads to a more increased workforce for the country contributing to its per capita income. It also has been found that $1 billion per year is lost by some countries by failing to educate girls at the same level as boys. So quality education also has to be equal. It also has to be accessible to all regardless of gender, religion, culture, and state of life. There has also been an observed decrease in the risk of war if the secondary school enrollment rate is 10% higher than the average. Then the risk of war drops by 8%. Again, when more people are more educated, they become more aware, they become more exposed to the diversities in culture, the diversities in religion, and indifference disappears. Tolerance and sensitivity is gained through education. Also, there is increase in political participation. Literate people are more likely to participate in the democratic process of voting and exercise their civil rights. As we say here in the Philippines, we want more educated, we want more aware voters to be able to elect future leaders of the country. Alright, so lastly, education also requires partnership through goal SDG number 17. As what Dr. Alex has mentioned earlier, as all, same with all the other SDGs, each SDG cannot stand alone. It has to be, there has to be collaboration, there has to be partnership towards all the goals and among other goals to be able to achieve all, not only one goal, not only some goals, but all of the 17 goals. Alright? So let's go to the next slide. So now this is a very exciting part of our discussion tonight. Imagine your country leaders in your UN SDG meeting or conference that discusses what should be, the sub-goals under SDG 4, quality education. What point or points would you put forward? So if you're in the shoes of, your UN country representative or your UN country ambassador, in an SDG conference, what should be your priority points for the SDG 4 sub-goals? So you can unmute or you can type in the chat your answers to this question. That will be giving you some time to reflect. So, retired Professor Dr. Shilpa mentioned education for all, so that's good. Dr. Alex Reyes said teaching financial literacy. All right, that's very applicable now because we're all concerned about our finances because it's really in the pandemic era. Retired Matthew said to ensure that education is available to all. All right. So these are all valid answers under SDG 4 quality education. But let's look at specifically what the SDG 4 targets are. So let's go to the next slide. Thank you so much. So SDG 4 is actually made up of 7 targets and 3 means of implementation. So target 4.1 is quality primary and secondary education for all. So by 2030, it is said that all girls and boys must have access to complete, free, equitable, and quality primary and secondary education, leading to relevant and effective learning outcomes. So it includes the provision of 12 years of free, publicly funded, inclusive, equitable, and quality primary and secondary education, of which at least 9 out of the 12 years are compulsory, leading to relevant learning outcomes. So this should be ensured again for all, regardless of gender, culture, religion, or state of life, without any discrimination. Target 4.2 is all about early childhood and pre-primary education. Again, by 2030, it is said that all girls and boys must have access to quality early childhood development, care, and pre-primary education so that they are ready for their primary education. So the provision of at least 1 year of free and compulsory quality pre-primary education is encouraged to be developed as well by well-trained educators in this field, as well as that of early childhood development and care, because this subset of learners actually have specific needs, because this forms the pre-foundation for their formative years later on. Target 4.3, and by the way, if you would have any questions, feel free to cut me or raise your hand or put in the chat. Alright? So target 4.3 is all about equal access to TVET and higher education. So by 2030, equal access for all women and men to affordable and quality technical, vocational, and tertiary education, including university education. So it is imperative to reduce whatever barriers that are there to skills development and technical and vocational education and training. So starting from the secondary level all the way to tertiary level, including university, and to provide as well lifelong learning opportunities for youth and adults. So the provision of tertiary education as well as lifelong learning should be made progressively free and affordable in line with existing international agreements. So I see a chat here. Oh, all right. So I thought it was a question. Apologies. So target 4.4, and it says here that by 2030 there has to be a substantial increase in the number of youth and adults who have relevant skills, again including technical and professional skills, to prepare them for employment, decent jobs, and entrepreneurship. So learning opportunities should be increased and diversified using a wide range of education and training modalities so that all of the youth and all of the adults, especially girls and women, can acquire knowledge that is relevant, skills and competencies for decent work and life. So target 4.5 is all about gender equality and equal access for all. And by 2030, to achieve quality education, there has to be a complete elimination of gender disparities in education to ensure equal access to all of the levels of education and vocational training, not only for our gender groups, but also for the vulnerable groups, including people with disabilities, indigenous peoples, and children in vulnerable situations. Target 4.6 is all about youth and adult literacy, and this sub-goal or target ensures that all of the youth and a substantial portion of our adults, again, both men and women, achieve literacy and numeracy. So the principles, strategies, and actions for this target are underpinned by a contemporary understanding of literacy as a continuum of proficiency levels in a given context. So it goes beyond the understanding of a simple dichotomy of literate versus illiterate. So actions for this target 4.6 aims at ensuring that by 2030, all of the young people and adults across the world should have achieved relevant and recognized proficiency levels in functional literacy and numeracy skills that are equivalent to levels achieved at successful completion of their basic education. So the last target is target 4.7, and it's all about sustainable development and global citizenship. So this sub-goal or target ensures that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development through education for the goals, for sustainable lifestyle, for human rights, for gender equality, for promotion of the culture of peace and non-violence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity, and the contribution of culture to sustainable development. So, quality education prepares us all to be global citizens, aware of the existence of each other's culture, religion, gender, and such. So, let's go now to the 3 means of implementation. Oh, sorry, one slide back again. So, the first means of implementation is safe and inclusive learning environment. So we have to build and create our education facilities that would be child, disability, and gender sensitive, and also safe, to be safe, non-violent, inclusive, and effective learning environments for all. Next is scholarships for higher education. There has to be a substantial expansion in the number of scholarships available to developing countries and also to the least developed countries for enrollment in higher education, including vocational training and information in various fields that are available. So, last means of implementation is the professional development of teachers. So there also has to be a substantial increase in the supply of qualified teachers, including through international cooperation for teacher training, again in developing and least developed countries. All right. So next slide, please. So now I will ask you all to choose between numbers 1 to 7. Choose any number, a single number randomly between 1 to 7, and remember your chosen number. So you can send your number in the chat so that you won't forget it. But all right, so I can see Rotarian Lagoon has already chosen a number, and also Professor Dr. Shilpa and our co-facilitator, Edwina. Alright, Dr. Alex, maybe you've chosen as well. So, next slide, please. So now, with your chosen number, let's take note of these corresponding roles and situations that we're going to assign to you. So we are going to play a little game or a little activity, which is role playing. We will try and put ourselves in the shoes of our corresponding roles. So I will send the roles in the chat. You can pay attention to it. So role number 1 is that you are a 12-year-old boy and your parents are daily wage earners. So role number 2, you are an indigenous boy living in a remote mountainous region with little to no digital access in Thailand. Role number 3, I think this is what Rotarian you has chosen. Role number 3, you are a young girl living in a war-torn village in Syria. Role number 7, which is what Rotarian Professor Dr. Shilpa has chosen. You are a visually challenged young girl in a village with no school facilities. Edwina chose number 5. You are a young woman born in a small-scale farming family with traditional patriarchal values in Haryana, India. And Dr. Alex has chosen number 2, again, an indigenous boy or girl living in a remote mountainous region with little access in Thailand. So let's flash our questions for each of the roles. So again, this is a role-playing activity, and we will try to put ourselves in the shoes of that person or situation assigned to us. And please try to answer the questions as honestly as possible, as deeply as possible, and we will go to each one of us to share. So first, imagine if you're in the shoes of that person assigned to your number, and if you're in the shoes of that person, are there barriers to education for you? And if yes, if there are barriers, what are these barriers? Can you identify these barriers? And it can be more than one. If there are no barriers, why not? So again, I'll give you around 3 minutes to think of the answers to the questions, and then we will start our sharing. All right? So, Dr. Alex?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, Doc. Hi, Dr. Lorenzo. So I have like 3 minutes to think about it, but
Yeah.
I think I already
Oh,
have.
all right. So,
my
I guess we can start with Dr. Alex. All right?
Yeah, so if
That's
I
okay.
am like boy that is like in the indigenous region of Thailand and I have no access to digital education, therefore I will be deprived from like connecting with my teachers, especially that I do not have the means to like have the necessary equipment that they have. So therefore, I think geography plays a significant barrier to what is happening with me as a student. And of course, it's going to be a problem with me and my growth as a student because I wouldn't have the skills and the tools in order for me to really thrive, especially during this COVID time because I am far from everybody and I think I would be like focusing on other things that could like distract me as a student. So I think geography really plays a big role in this, most especially the ones in the hinterlands because we're talking about the mountain regions. And so I see this also in the Philippines that they do not have access to internet connection and it is difficult for them. And so what happens with learning, I think we see the inequalities now. And so this is what we are trying to reduce. However, we see this as a reality and of course us as educators, we try to really reach the hinterlands and therefore this is a challenge for us. Maybe the government should do something more, but they will have to spend a lot. And so spending for education is another consideration that they need to do. So this is, I think, the situation that I will be in if I am a boy in the mountainous region. And it happens also in other countries. We share the same problem.
Totally agree with you, Dr. Alex. think internet is really starting to become a basic necessity for education now, especially in the online learning that we have with the pandemic. I guess if I was also in the same situation, that would be like my primary barrier to access for education. So thank you very much for your sharing, Dr. Alex. Who would like to go next? And maybe Dr. Alex, you would like to nominate the next person to share.
Okay. I would like to nominate my friend, President Shilpa.
Go ahead, Dr. Shilpa.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alex. Actually, I'm a visually challenged member in village with no school facilities. See, if there is no school, that means as a girl, and that too visually impaired girl, I will get no education. And just now, Dr. Alex discussed about the sustainable goals, and Lorenzo recently also elaborated on. So, if at all I will not get education, I will not be empowered, then I will be poor, I will not be rich, then I will not be self-sufficient, then I will not have the awareness of many different things. So these are the many things that are involved. Sustainable development goals will not be achieved if there is no school. So school is the basic thing from where everything starts. So if I don't get education, I will not be empowered. I will not be self-sufficient. I will not be able to think about the planet. Forget about the planet, I will not be able to think about myself. So there will not be any equality thing and all. So there will be no gender sensitization if I don't get education. And so I think that I will be a really poor girl living in a poor village. I will remain right from the beginning and I will die like that only. So there will not be any change whatsoever in my talent, that is emotionally, intellectually, I will not grow. So that is what I think. Thank you. Thank you, Lorenzo. It's really very interesting.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shilpa. Again, Dr. Shilpa's situation is a very interesting one because there is an individual barrier, there is disability, being visually challenged, and then there is an external barrier, which is the absence of school facilities. And she brought up like an interesting aspect, which is a cycle of poverty, which can only be broken by education. So when you don't have the basic facilities for education, the educational process won't start. I mean, you can educate them at home, but it's different in the classroom setting with the proper materials, the proper facilities, and such. Thank you, Dr. Shilpa, for your sharing. Oh, all right.
May I say one more thing?
Go ahead, Dr. Shilpa.
Yeah, actually, I'm taking the privilege of getting a chance to speak. Actually, I chose 7, and I would love to tell you all that I'm really working for the visually impaired students from 2012. So what I do, that is not important, but I'm working for them, obviously in the field of education, by providing them with, I prepare teaching material in audio format, and it is provided free to them. Okay, so I was shocked to select number 7. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I believe that is destiny. It will help amplify your noble work towards the education of children with visual impairments. And maybe we can share your work soon in the Rotary channels. Alright? So thank you, Dr. Shilpa. Who would you like to go next? To nominate, to share?
So,
Edwina?
yeah, okay, no problem. Edwina, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Shilpa and Dr. Alex, for your inspiring sharing. For me, I chose number 5, a young woman born to a small-scale farming family with traditional patriarchal values in Haryana, India. So I'm not that familiar with this Haryana culture. Maybe you know more than I know. However, according to the situation, I can imagine that first of all, I'm a girl and a daughter in the family, and it's a small-scale poor farming family. So maybe my cannot afford the school fees for all of the children in the house. So if the parents have to make a decision between me and my brothers, I think in a some preference cultural society, maybe the parents would prefer to send my brothers to school instead of me. That's the number one barrier. Second one, also imagine I was that girl. Maybe I expected to do some housework at home, like help take care of my younger siblings, brothers, sisters, and as a farming family, I might need to milk cows and do some domestic work. In that case, I also wouldn't have time to go to school, or even if I go to school, I couldn't really spend time on studying. So that's also another barrier. And the third one, I imagine that sometimes in traditional country society, I might expected to marry at a very young age. Sometimes it's kind of in exchange for bills or for the dowries or whatever this kind of things happening around. My parents might just, assign a husband for me, even though I don't know him. Just kind of arranged marriage, and maybe I couldn't continue my schooling. And even though my husband is supporting me to go to school after the marriage, I might immediately end up with early pregnancy. I will have babies and, take care of the babies. So even though with access to school, I might not be able to complete the education. I might just end up dropping out schooling. And number four, I think sometimes there are social stigma around girls. Maybe when it's not common for girls to go to school in our society. So if you are the one who goes to school, maybe your other fellows in the village may make fun of you. They think you're doing something useless instead of helping your families. All those kind of stigma and discrimination will also affect me to continue my education. So those are four barriers I could think of for scenario 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Edwina. Thank you, Edwina. I really admire your sharing because you really specified the points and the barriers. It's different when the barrier is like an influential force or factor that's hindering you from education or jobs or any other opportunities. And I can really relate to this because in the Marine movement, in the organization that I'm part of, we have identified in our survey that traditional families and patriarchal values, influence of the father as a decision maker, coupled with a traditional sense of thinking, is really a part of the primary reasons why girls, especially those living in marginalized, rural, and poverty-stricken communities and families, cannot go to school, cannot access even secondary education. That's really, really disturbing because, as what Edwina mentioned a while ago, even at this age, there are still families who practice arranged marriages, who exercise like the concept of dowries, and even box women, box girls in domesticated roles that they have to take care of families and not go to school or work. That's a really, really alarming aspect that we have right now, even at this modern day and age. So thank you for pointing that out, Edwina. So we have our last but not least sharer, Rotarian Manu, who chose number 3. Go ahead, Rotarian Manu.
Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to share that, when there is a war, there's destruction everywhere, and school buildings, even if sometimes people think it's a safe place, but it's actually not a safe place. And schools might be bombarded, might be destroyed, children's will be at home, and hearing so much of noise will really affect their growth, both mental and physical. And when it is a continuous process of war continuing, and there is no way of peace being restored, then it really affects every single person psychologically. And when there is no school, when parents are busy thinking about how to get the next meal, and there is no provision for education, either there's no environment at home to teach the kids, and so there would be a lot of associated problems. There could be human trafficking, because everything leads to one another. I mean, education being the one and only most important thing for every single individual. When education is not there, and when there is no peace in the environment that the person is, in this example it's a little girl, then it's absolutely no development whatsoever. And that's really very frightening for any society. That's really very frightening. So education should always be in a peaceful environment. I'm not saying that it happens everywhere. There are other kinds of problems, not necessarily war. There might not be war, but there could be some other problems which really doesn't help children to have education in a proper environment. So that's just my thoughts, that in a war area it's really very difficult to have any education whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you, Rotarian Madhu, and I really agree with you. So when we have war, it equates to tragedy, disaster, and destruction. It's like the ultimate barrier. There's just nothing. The victims of the war are sometimes they sometimes become refugees, or they sometimes are stripped of their basic human rights. So I can't imagine any more barrier that's as ultimate or as tragic as being a victim of the war. And it's really undeniably different if we are the ones personally there. So it's really, really different from watching, what is shown in the news, or reading from an article or from a documentary, from being in that situation. So I guess this is like the most tragic, I think, from all of the situations. Thank you so much for your sharings, everyone. So let's now delve deeper on the barriers for quality education. So, and if you want to share more in the chat, please do so, feel free. It's now time to look at the barriers and understand the barriers to institute for quality education. And it is important to look at education from the lens of those in or experiencing these barriers. Next slide, please. So the right to education, or the inalienable right of every child to quality education, was first acknowledged in the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So this states that everyone has the right to education, and that it should be at least free at the primary level. Not only does everyone have the right to free and compulsory primary education, this education that they would receive should also focus on full human development, strengthen respect for human rights, and promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship. And this universal right to education is reinforced in the 1960 UNESCO Convention Against Discrimination in Education. So this reinforces the right to a free and compulsory quality primary education, and further mandates that discrimination in education is a violation of human rights. It sets out that discrimination in education includes any distinction, exclusion, limitation, or preference that is based on race, color, sex, language, religion, political or any other opinion, or any other aspect. So we have to look at education, especially the barriers, with a rights-based approach. So accessing and receiving quality education is a universal human right. So there are three important aspects of education as a human right. First is the participation for quality education in itself. Second is the practice of human rights in education. And last is education as a right that facilitates the fulfillment of all the other fundamental rights. So our first barrier, is poverty. So three of the key ways in which poverty acts as a barrier to accessing and completing a full course of quality primary education are: first, educational costs; second is child labor; and third is economic migration. So for educational costs, there are direct and indirect costs for primary education for children and their families as well. Direct costs are those that are fees that families primarily pay to send their children to school, um, which can include expenses for books, for tuition, transportation costs, school uniforms, and other stuff. Indirect costs, also known as opportunity costs, include the value of children's time and effort measured as foregone earnings. Children's time is considered as a cost because if they're not in school or an educational program, they could earn an income or perform other activities to help their families. So second is child labor, and it is defined as work that is mentally, physically, socially, or morally dangerous and harmful to a child, but also interferes with a child's right to education by depriving them of opportunities to attend school, obliging the children to leave school prematurely, or requiring them to attempt to combine their school attendance with excessively long and heavy work. So, in its most extreme forms, and I would really, some countries experience this. Child labor would involve, child slavery, separation from families, exposed to serious hazards and illnesses, and being left to fend for themselves, usually on the streets of large cities. In Manila, as you can see, child labor can also begin at a very early age, alarmingly. So third is economic migration, and it's a process of people leaving their normal place of residence to settle outside of their country of origin to improve the quality of life. And this becomes barriers to education because as economic migration involves the migration of children, they are uprooted from their communities and they have to adjust. They have to be able to function in a new community and in a new school environment. So second is challenging geographies. The next slide, please. Thank you. Second is geography or challenging geographies. So most countries have geographic areas that are very, very challenging. In some countries, these areas are more numerous or vast than in other countries. So there are many kinds of geographical environments that can be viewed as challenging, including both physical and human geographies. Challenging physical geographies may include mountainous areas, steep hillsides, deltas and river basins, areas near volcanic and tectonic zones, deserts and islands, among others. So these areas can also be prone to extreme climatic and meteorological events like hurricanes, droughts, floods, and tornadoes. So human geographies that are challenging can include areas with high population densities and growth rates, as well as areas with cultural, linguistic, religious, and political varieties. So yeah, I agree with Professor Dr. Shilpa. India is the best example of this. Maybe we can share more in the chat how it is like dealing with these barriers in India, so that we can be more enlightened with this issue at hand. So, for example, areas with mountainous geographies often involve children who have to encounter or travel long distances, steep inclines, which are very, very dangerous from their homes, to travel to the nearest school. And more often than not, they do not have any access to public transportation. I think in the Philippines, I've seen a documentary where children have to climb down the mountains and cross rivers in their slippers or barefoot just to reach school. So potential strategies to address this would be to establish small, multi-grade community managed schools for remote villages. So as I mentioned earlier, there are also human-made geographies that are challenging, and this could be those areas that are population dense, or for example, areas with public schools that are overcrowded due to high birth rates and migration. So the solutions to this would be to establish NGOs or low-cost private schools, or even public schools to complement government-run schools. So lastly, cultural geographies and barriers would involve the community's principal language that can be different from the official language of instruction. And for example, I think in India, there are a lot of communities with dialects or languages apart from the national language, also in the Philippines. And it's very, very hard for students in rural areas to be able to understand and learn the official medium of instruction, which is, I think, English in the Philippines. So now, most schools, as mandated, I think, Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, by that ed would mandate instructing in their mother tongue, I think in their dialect. Am I correct, Dr. Alex?
Yes, you are right. In most public schools, they use mother tongue. However, in private schools, since they pay premium, it is expected that we give our instruction through English. But in other schools, mostly public schools, they really have materials in mother tongue. They say because they learn better with mother tongue according to their studies. So that is why they teach them. And it is, I think, one way of reaching to the students that cannot really comprehend the English language. So they start first with the common language that they speak. Yes, that's true, Dr. Lorenzo. It started just when we started our senior high school as well, when we changed the curriculum.
I think about 5 years ago. Yeah, only recently, right? Yes. So, Rotarian Professor Dr. Shilpa said that Rotary International has taken some very positive steps through their literacy mission. Happy Village and Happy School are the initiatives to tackle these challenges. But that's a very, very commendable initiative. Maybe if we have the link or the website to the initiative, we can check it out after our workshop. So, Edwina said that there's a BBC documentary called On the Way to School, filming the difficulties that children face globally on the way to school. India is also covered in the documentary, interestingly. Wow, so thank you very much for these bits of information. This contributes to our discussion. So next slide, please. Let's now go to the next barrier, which is conflict, insecurity, and instability. So conflict-affected situations, insecurity and instability act as one of the largest barriers today to children receiving quality primary education. The 2011 World Bank Development Report found that people in fragile and conflict-affected states are more than 3 times as likely to be unable to send their children to school as those in other developing countries. So conflict and conflict-affected situations that are fragile can act as barriers to completion of primary education. So this can be due to armed conflict, or even recruitment of children as soldiers, or the internal displacement of persons or victims or refugees of war. So for armed conflict, as we all know, terrorism may be a weapon of such conflicts. They can really disrupt even the everyday life of they arise from things like political, economic, religious, or ethnic competition, but fueled by poverty, corruption, or ambition for power. So child soldiers are those who are under the age of 18, recruited by state or non-state armed groups. So the recruitment violates their rights and causes them physical, developmental, emotional, mental harm. Lastly, internal displacement of persons are those from being forced or obliged to flee from their homes as a result of armed conflict or wars, and they become refugees, as I mentioned earlier. So these are all barriers to education due to conflict. And this is worsened by efforts for refugee education, which are subpar, because refugee education generally found to be of low quality, with indicators that measure inputs rather than outcomes. And in many situations, teachers involved with this do not even have the required basic training viewed as minimum. So next barrier we have, I think, refugees. As I mentioned earlier, as a result of conflict and of war, of any other unrest, people become uprooted from their country or place of origin, and they transfer to another place or area of settlement, and they become refugees. So access to education for refugees is limited and uneven across regions and settings of displacement. So with refugees, the enrollment for public school is down by 63%. And at secondary levels, it drops dramatically more at 36%. It also is further hindered by an increase in the ratio of teachers to pupils, and worsened as well by the teachers not having the minimum basic training, as I've mentioned earlier. So next barrier, I think our focus leader Edwina will cover for this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lorenzo and Dr. Alex, for your thought-provoking presentation. In the background, the code SDGs and the details explanation on SDG for college education. Also, thank you, Madu and President Professor Dr. Shoka for your active engagement in our discussion in all the ways barriers. Those are really valuable contribution and inspiration. So please feel free to do so to continue let us know more about the context in the India. So let's come back to the rest of the barriers for children to access college education. Number 5 is gender, as we discussed a lot earlier, especially in the scenario number 5, you can see that there are so many social barriers for different gender to go to school. So normally we have 2 types of dimensions. The first one is focused on the household and community level barriers, and the second one is more about gender dimension. So for the household and community one, we've got the same issue with poverty as discussed by Dr. Lorenzo earlier, which is direct costs of education such as school fees, clothing, shoes, books, and supplies. Also indirect costs or opportunity costs of education, such as the cost of not using child labor. And this kind of happens to both genders. The third one is more about attitudes and cultural practices such as traditional beliefs, gender stereotyping, lack of knowledge, benefits of education, gender differentiated child rearing practices. We can see this is happening all over the world, not only in the Philippines or India. Many traditional societies we accept this is continue to happen. The first one is health-related issues, including poor nutrition and HIV and AIDS. Also, in some African countries, Indonesia, there are still 28 countries practicing FGM, female mutilation, genital mutilation. This is also a very poor practice to females' body. It's also related to the health implications. So we can see even we have achieved a lot of progress in achieving gender equality, but still facing enormous challenges in this role. And when we take a closer look at the gender dimension, as we have discussed before, there is some preference or priorities in the household. If you have to make a decision between sending a boy or girl to school, the boy will usually be given precedence. And second one, there are also traditional division of labor. This also disadvantages girls more likely to have to work in a home, care for siblings and other type of domestic work. And thirdly, this is also a common one for marriage, low status women, and intractable patriarchal societies. So we can see this would result in lower priority education of girls. They might think it's useless to send their daughters to school. They cannot gain something from that. So in that case, actually, it's not human. It's a violation of human rights because they value disregard their children as not as a human being, but has something to trade off. So sometimes the concept of education also can reinforce gender stereotypes in school. So sometimes people think school is a place to educate boys and girls would contribute to gender equality. Sometimes the textbook, the reference book, the curriculum can include something that's detrimental to the gender equality. When I was in my primary school in China, we are learning some real aspirations, and the pictures embedded in the textbook shows boys for policemen, girls for teacher or nurse or any other caregiving roles or professions. But this is not true. In both women and men or any type of gender can achieve in most of the professions. But sadly, we can still see those stereotypes in our curriculum in school. So in that case, school can also be the perpetrator in discrimination, in spreading the gender discrimination. So we have to really pay extra attention in our teaching environments and to ensure that what we have learned and taught in school is like gender neutral and to pass on the positive message to students. And last but not least, those often more likely to care for family and work, those without family stability, the more vulnerable to exploitation. This can be related to the gender-based violence. So it's not only about the economic or social things, it can also bring the violence either in home or in public sphere. I think the situation in India is also kind of worrying because I think according to the latest data that many violence, gender-based violence is still going on. Not here, but also all over the world. For the FGM, it's also one type of gender-based violence. But on the other side, boys often also receive more food than girls. I think it's discussed by Dr. Alex. Nutrition is also important for the kids to focus on learning in the classroom. But sadly, sometimes the foods are disproportionately distributed among boys and girls. So all of these factors affect kind of damaging the goal of gender equality within the context of education. Just checking. If you want to share something in your country that what you have reviewed as a violation to gender equality, to the rights of education, also having a chance to learn from you. There's another data provided by UNESCO showing the trends between the year 1985 and the year 2005. That's 25 years. We can see there is increase in youth literacy rate for both genders. The left side is male and the right side is female. We can see both genders are increasing the more higher rates of youth literacy. And the gender gap between the male and female is also narrowing down. But despite of this progress, in the year 2010, we can still see it's nearly 5% of that gap between male and female youth literacy rates. So that means we have to continue our work to advocate for gender equality in education and to do more to help achieving education for all. And the sixth area is climate change. I think this is getting more attention and wellness worldwide because especially for these recent years we can see more extreme climate disasters happening all over the world. This is all due to the more serious climate change situations, especially for countries like Philippines, for the island countries, they heavily rely on the climate to support their industries like fishing industry, farming, supporting their livelihoods and the economy. In this case, if we are facing the growing disasters and environmental fallout, it will also affect education. Moreover, significant segments within these population groups have low rates of school environment and high rates of absenteeism, because when there is a flooding or typhoon hitting the city or the place, children have to stop going to school, they have to stay at home for safety reasons, and if this happens frequently, they might miss most of their classes. In that case, it will also affect their learning outcomes. So when we are doing the education, advocate for education, we also have to consider all these interconnected aspects, not only to teach the education, the content, like different subjects, we also have to consider climate, gender, and all the other factors contributing to the same growth. The last one is about the infrastructure. This is also very common in most developing countries. Like for the second one about the geography, mountain areas, they also facing the difficulty of poor infrastructure of the roads and transportations. Apart from that, we have other type of infrastructure failure, like overcrowded or dangerous and lacking adequate sanitary facilities or lacking the last two factors, like inadequate sanitary facilities and the lack of hygiene facilities, could be more challenging for girls. As we can imagine, some girls, when they're in menstruation or the period, we don't have sanitary napkins, we don't have something to support them, so they just choose to stay at home to avoid some uncomfortable things happening. So we can see all these factors cannot happen single. If we don't address all of them, we cannot tackle the problem. And infrastructure can also affect another group, the barrier for people with disabilities. I think as mentioned by President Soka, she said that the facilities in the school is very important for those people with disabilities and who have special needs to accommodate their conditions. However, most countries they don't have enough resources to build up the standard facilities, or the number is not enough to meet the continued growing needs of those people. And also, even though they have this skill, they might don't have enough teachers with the special education need. So all this kind of infrastructure failure will affect children accessing to school and continue their education also. So we have talked a lot about the barriers to before, but for SDG for quality education, everyone is saying we want quality education, we need to be champion, we need to advocate for that. When you are saying that, what is quality exactly we're talking about? So this is a question also for the audience and for my co-facilitators and for Chuck, Du, and Mr. Could you also share your thoughts on what is quality in quality education? I think everyone has a different understanding of this. I just wait for a few seconds for your thoughts. What is quality in quality education? While waiting, we can also look at the application provided by UNDP UNESCO well. So in the past, we have a conventional definition of quality, which includes literacy, numeracy, and life skills. This is directly linked to such quite critical components as teachers, content methodologies, curriculum examination systems. This literacy, numeracy, and life skills is more about the contents we are learning or the outcomes we want to achieve. However, there are several other factors to consider aside from the learning outcomes. We have first knowledge. It's not only about the skills, but also essential cognitive achievement that all learners should reach. That's the basic level of the quality. The second one is the values we are kind of imparting from the teachers in the process of learning, which can include solidarity, gender equality, tolerance, mutual understanding, respect for human rights and balance, respect for human life and dignity. So for this sort of values, quality of values, sometimes we use character education or quality education. Means we're not only imparting the knowledge, but also the qualities of a human being, like you are being kind to people, you have integrity, you're supporting each other, all those kind of valuable characters and qualities of the human being. And thirdly, we also have other kind of skills or competencies. This is particularly important in the 21st century, because we're not only finding jobs by our CV, but also the practical skills we have, like how to solve problems, how to communicate clearly with respect, also to experiment, to innovate, team working, to live together, interact with those who are different, and to learn how to learn. So all these are kind of soft skills, or sometimes we call it life skills. It's like life learning process. You might not learn it in a single class. You might continue learning this throughout the learning process, and even when you go to the workforce, you still improve those life skills. And lastly, it's about behaviors. The willingness to put into practice what has been learned. Because if you just learned, like listen to what teachers have taught you or listen to others, you don't practice it, you will just kept it in your mind, and it won't lead to action, won't lead to impact and changes. So when we discuss the quality education, we have to look at it holistically, from knowledge, the values, skills, competencies, and behaviors. So in education field, we sometimes also talk about holistic education. You, the person, you, the students, as a holistic human being, instead of just a student to learn knowledge. And there is a more comprehensive definition, illustration for the quality, which is provided by UNESCO. So this one, on the right hand side, we can see there are three circles in the middle, which is the core of learning. The inner circle, we have level of learner, and the outer circle, we have level of learning system. And it's like step. So as education, the first level is level of learner. As learner, we need to like seek out learners, and just we have to consider what the learner brings, and also what kind of contents we are learning, and the learning processes, also learning environment. So all these five factors will contribute to the level of the learner to determine the ultimate quality. And apart from the learner, it's like internal internal factor. We also have the external factor as the level of learning system or the organization. So we have to also think of the managerial and administrative structure and the processes. This could enable a continuous and supportive environment for people to learn. And the next one is implementation of good policies. Because if we don't have policies, especially nowadays, as many countries are revising the education policies to include more group of people. Like there used to be discrimination for LGBTQ groups, there used to be discrimination for people living with disability. We might have a lot of challenges to access to school, but it's positive to see some countries are revising it to include these groups into their whole education framework. So policies is also essential to ensure a good learning environment. And next one is appropriate legislative framework. So after the policies, it has to be endorsed by the law to ensure the rights of education. As Dr. Lorenzo mentioned before, education is a human right, so it has to be really written in the law and has to be implemented. So in this case, we have to not only just, it's important, it's a must. It's not we should or it's good to have education. We must have it as our rights. So it's serious. And the ninth one is resources. Once you have all those external lawful environment, all those policies, structure in place, you still have to have the resources to implement it. Like you have the schools, you have teachers, but you have to get the right curriculum, you have to pay for the teachers, because the teacher's salary is also one of the issues happening in some countries. Some country teachers are not well paid, and because of that, we are losing wonderful teachers. This is very sad to see that. And the last one is measurement of learning outcomes. So we have contributed everything, we have invested the resources, but only by evaluating the learning outcomes can we identify the problems, like whether we're doing rightly, whether we are on track. If not, we find a way to adjust it. So all those about the definition of quality education, especially the word quality. But come back to teachers ourselves. Everyone here seems to be a teacher or in education sector. So for us, what is lifelong learning? Because all the other ones we talk about in a broad way, but now we want to take the lens to ourselves, like for us, each of us, what is lifelong learning? Dr. Alex just typed chasing after ambitions, and Chalmadu writes education is lifelong learning and its various aspects. Exactly. Yeah. So feel free to type your answers, type your understanding of lifelong learning. This is for everyone. It's not only for students in the classroom, but for educators also. While waiting for more answers to come in, we can just review this illustration about lifelong learning. Apologies that the image might not be very clear, it might look blurry, but don't worry, we have the link. We'll just send the link of this. We have the YouTube link which detail describe this image. So for this image, it basically tells us why we need lifelong learning. what is lifelong learning and how we can engage ourselves into lifelong learning. Yes, Dr. Lorenzo said education is a spectrum as long as we are living, we learn. Yeah, exactly. It's not about one phase or one day, every day throughout our life, right? So from the left side, we can see the first is professional goals. So when we think of lifelong learning, we have to ask ourselves why we have to do lifelong learning, why we have to commit ourselves in lifelong learning. So some people may say because of the professional goals,